so we're working on this Bourree audition for the violin. And before I get into some details about something that I think that you should all be working on, I'm going to play it a couple more times at different tempos. And so the first tempo that I'm going to do it at is 85. And right now we're at 115, so you're going to want to make sure that you slow it down and really pay attention to the details at the slower tempos too. So the cool thing about this is you can play along at home. I'm playing with a metronome, so I'm pretty steady here, and you should practice with a metronome too. So let me quickly change my metronome here. I'm going to again change it to 85, which is 30 beats per minute slower. Alright, I've changed my metronome and I'm going to go at 85 beats per minute. And I would play that 2 times through, but for sake of time, I'm just going to switch my metronome to now 100, so 15 beats per minute faster than 85. So here's 100 beats per minute. Alright, so I definitely recommend going at different intervals too, different speeds. And what we're going to do now is I'm going to go over some concepts that I think are really important to getting this piece down. It's not a long piece. Basically, you'll play the 8 measures chunks 2 times through on that. So the first thing that you're going to want to do when you get to this piece is just make sure you know where all of the notes are. Check the key signature. It is in G major for violin, different keys for the viola, cello, bass. And in this key, we have C natural. So we're going to make sure that we have low 2 on the A string. Our finger pattern on the A string is going to look like this. Our finger pattern on the G string is going to look like this. It just goes down to the D string on the G in measure 4. Now, what you're going to need to pay attention to is that accidental in measure 5. It goes to a C sharp because it's a secondary leading tone, and basically you're changing the key from G to D, and that C sharp becomes the new scale degree 7 into scale degree 1, which is D. Alright, so here's the beginning. I would just play each note, really long tones, loud. Make sure you're hearing it in tune. And one thing that you can do is you can play it with your notes with open strings. So that first note even, I'm going to want to find where that note is and just hold that note out. In this case, it is a octave above the open D, and so you're going to be able to play it with your open D, if your open D is in tune, which it should be. So you hear that note. So then I move on. Maybe I go back and forth between the 2 different pitches there. If I play it all with my open D, that's another way I can check to make sure it's in tune. I'm going for that pleasing sound. That's a 6th. If I'm a little out of tune on that, it's not going to sound quite right. So one thing that I recommend doing, long tones all through the piece, making sure you really know where each of those notes are. There's a G, I can check that with open G. and it should sound in tune. Out of tune, sharp or flat would sound like that. We don't want that. Okay, the next thing after you go through just long tones on all of those notes is I would go measure by measure, make sure you understand what that rhythm is. This is where playing back what I played before would help you out if you don't quite know how a measure is supposed to sound. The good thing is this piece is just quarter, eighths, and half notes, dotted half notes as well. So there's nothing too tricky in the rhythm. Still, I would get a metronome and have that metronome going and play through each measure just really steady to make sure you understand how that measure goes. For example, measure 1 with the pickup. Play it a few times. Okay, measure 2, you have quarter, half. And so maybe that's a tricky measure in this piece because you have a half note, you have a long note on weak beat, on beat 2. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, and let me play that for you. Okay, so each measure needs to be really honest with a lot of integrity in terms of, is the beat really steady? That's the second thing I would go through. Third thing, eighth note run. This is kind of the technical aspect of this piece, and we're looking at measure 5. Yep, measure 5, and you add that C sharp. Make sure that high 2 is high enough. Here it is. So the good thing about that is it's a pattern, and you can tell that it's going up 3 notes, down 2, up 3, down 2. And so that is probably what you're going to have to practice a bit to get it up to 115. A few suggestions for that. What I like to do is I like to change the rhythm, just to 4 notes at a time. Don't make it too hard. 4 notes at a time. So I'm going to play a long note and then a short note. Just 4 notes. Also do the opposite. I'd go short, long. So that's going to sound like this. And as we're doing that, you're noticing my hand's not moving around too much. It's just my fingers, because in a fast run like this, you have to be efficient. Just the fingers are going to be moving there. The other rhythm that I would add is changing, of those 4 notes, 1 is long. So, for example, if I made the first of all 4 long, it would sound like this. The second would sound like this. The third. And the fourth. Now, you probably noticed I was washing my hand as I did that. I have it memorized. This piece isn't too tricky for me, but what you should do is take 4 notes and memorize those 4 notes to get them into your muscle memory. If you're just watching the music, think about how much of your brain power is going towards that page and just watching the music. Whereas if you could memorize 4 notes at a time, and just watch your fingers, or just not even watching your fingers, you're going to be able to get that into your muscle memory, and that's when it becomes easy. The fourth thing that I would add to this piece is the dynamics. And so you can see at the beginning of the piece, it says piano. It's got a crescendo and a decrescendo. And then the second line, the measure 5, It's got a long crescendo through that eighth note line. Make sure that you have the metronome going as you're doing this, because you don't want these eighth notes to become uneven. So what I'm going to do to get those eighth notes adding that contour is just take my open A string, 4 notes, and crescendo, crescendo, crescendo. Think about weight, angle, speed, and placement, and what that means for these notes. You have total of 16 notes there. So if you can, you want to make sure that you're using a little bit more bow speed for each note, a little bit more bow weight for each note. Here it is. So that's how I would practice the dynamics for those eighth notes. If you don't try it with just the bow first, you're not going to realize that all of the dynamics come from the bow there. I'm not doing anything in the left hand to change the dynamics. They all come from the bow. If you can't do that with the bow, the dynamics aren't going to happen. I might try 4 notes at a time now. I think about 1:15. And I'm going to try to crescendo 4 notes. Next 4 notes. Next 4 notes. Next 4 notes. And I crescendo all the way until that A. So after I am sure that I can crescendo with just 4 notes, I'm going to try now to do the 16th note, 16 of those eighth notes plus 2, so I guess it's 18, and then to that A. And you can back away at the end. Now you notice I'm not rushing on those eighth notes. I'm not rushing on those eighth notes. It's easy to get faster as you get louder, and that's not what you want to do. So that would sound like this. It's not as musically effective as you might think it would be, because you're getting more excited, but it's just sounding a little bit amateurish. Okay guys, so we played that violin excerpt there. You want to remember, first thing is, long tones. Know where each of those notes are. Play it with a tuner. Play it with open strings. Second thing is measure by measure. Just play each rhythm measure by measure. Make sure you know how that sounds. Add the metronome to it. Third thing is that eighth note run. Play it 3 ways. Long, short, long, short, long. Short, long, short, long, short, long. And then the last way is to take those 4 notes to make one of them long and the other 3 short. Last thing is dynamics. Add the dynamics to those eighth notes. Make sure that's crescendoing all the way until that A.